here. Well, it's been a while. I'm sorry I've been very quiet over the summer. I did recently put out the video about Christina Perry Rossi, but I've been meaning to make this book haul and move on to other things that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, but I've had a lot of technical issues, new equipment that I wanted to use, corrupted files, a lot of problems, and now the quantity of books and the quality of what I have to say about them have reversed, and for that I apologize. But let's do this. I have a lot of fun books to show you and this is a little splice edit because quite recently W.D. Clark contacted me and asked me if I had any interest in checking out his books, and I said, "Oh, gladly." I was, of course, aware of these. Well, at least white mythology was on my radar. I have, bought at least The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas and Cult of the Cactus Boots. So I'm aware of the Croata Samizdat Press and what they're doing, but I haven't really gotten around to reading any of it yet. Except now I have, because I already read white mythology, and I liked it very much. You get quite far in my book by being being intelligent and funny, and this has wit and intelligence in spades. Not yet read She Sang to Them, She Sang. Beautiful, beautiful books, both of them. But I will read this too, and I'll most likely make a little video where I talk about my impressions of them. But very cool, very grateful to W.D. Clark for sending these to me. Okay, so I'm going to begin with a couple of the big ones just to get them out of the way. And first up is the Cambridge Centenary Ulysses. I went to the launch of this in Dublin on Bloomsday, sitting quite uncomfortably, but it was very, very interesting event. I'm going to make a video where I share some of my thoughts about reading Ulysses and rereading Ulysses, and why you should read secondary material and why you shouldn't read secondary material. Probably won't learn too much from it, but it's something that I'm thinking about, and it would be nice to get it out there, to say it and feel done with it. This book is very nice. I've only read a couple of the chapters that I most adore. It was a birthday gift from my wife that I very much appreciate. Big purchase number 2. I'm going to take this. The one I bought for myself. And that is The Saltweed Factor by John Barth. This is a series of Franklin Library signed limited editions. Little info about the book. the man himself. Very nice texture on this. Signature. I know that not everyone is a big fan of these Franklin Library edition, mostly because gilded pages are not for everyone. But I had a very beaten up paperback of the Sotweed Factor, and this edition is beautifully illustrated. The font is nice and readable, nice colored subheadings, chapter headings. This is quite nice in my opinion. Barth, of course, is coming out with a new book this year, Postscripts. I have not yet read the Sotweed Factor, but I do like a lot of his shorter works and his nonfiction essays. I know a lot of people find his constant metafictional hijinks a bit tiring, a little bit too much of the clever wink wink. Look at me, I'm the guy who's writing a book and you're reading the book. And I understand that. I understand that his sense of humor, his aesthetics, everything is not for everyone. I don't know. I love it all. I think that it's just one of those things that I feel like I like the companionship of having Barth himself looking over my shoulder as I'm reading, pointing out all these fun little things. Like, I feel Barth is never invisible in his works, but that just gives me the feeling that I can appreciate his companionship. So those are a couple of big ones. I'm gonna save another big one for in the middle somewhere. Another birthday present. This lovely Salon edition is bilingual, which is very nice. My German isn't very good, but I can get through a lot of these, and it's very nice to just look over here for just a word here and there. This is the collected earlier poetry, and this just is more recent. He has a similar edition of the later poetry, where the hardback is out of print. Yeah, I could get the paperback of this, but I kind of hope to find a reasonably priced hardback, secondhand, I'd prefer the hardbacks. And it's another birthday present, and a wonderful one at that. I picked up a sanatorium journal, The Lighted Burrow by Max Blecher. Did a little review of this lovely little hardback with some nice Romanian art as well. I really enjoy him, and this sort of horrible story, of course, and he suffered from spinal tuberculosis and lived most of his short adult life in institutions, and this is a journal edited together from that, I guess. And it's translated by Christina Tudor-Sideri, who I've praised very highly before, and her Under the Sign of the Labyrinth was one of my top books of last year, and I still think of it often. So yeah, this is sublunary editions. There are lots of really amazing little books over at Sublunary. I got the Faculty of Useless Knowledge by Yuri Dombrowski. I did not do too much. I've heard very mixed things. I've heard that this is a contender for one of the truly great Russian novels. I've heard a very good friend of mine who is probably the most knowledgeable person I know of Russian authors, and he speaks and reads Russian. He said that he was terribly boring. He was excited to get to this at one point. Lovely edition too. I got The Absent City by Riccardo Piglia. I read this book on my remarkable tablet and it was a fantastic book. I returned to Piglia's Diaries of Emilio Renzi and reading the second volume now on bed, in my bed, and I just think it's very comfy. I just stopped. I stopped early on in the first diary to read one of his books, and this was what I picked up, and I think it's just like the most amazing meditation on language and humans as language producing machines, and sort of stories within stories with like permutations, stories and stories. It has this very moving idea of this island where the only book they have is Finnegan's Wake, and it's the perfect book because it's the only book you can understand at all ages. Yeah, no, there's more Piglia to come, but I know that no matter how the other Piglia end up, this will be a favorite of mine for years to come. Picked up Lands of Memory by Felisberto Hernandez. I was talking to Jorge over at Jorge's Corner. If you're not subscribed to Jorge, you definitely should. He was talking about how Felisberto Hernandez had written one of his favorite short stories of all time. And I think I also have the book which it is collected in. I think that one is in Piano Stories. I'm not 100% sure, but upon such high praise, I decided that I should pick up Lands of Memory. And such a lovely title. There was a big Dalkey Archive sale, and I picked up 10 books, I believe. There's going to be more of them. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, Francis Booth's Among Those Left, a British experimental novel from 1940 to 1980. The Dalkeys were a bit dirty. I don't blame them at all. It was probably something that's been in a warehouse, in storage, on shelves, has just been there, and they restarted their little wonderful press, and this was a very good deal, very cheap books and shipping. So I don't blame them for that. I talked about this book on maybe my second video. I didn't talk about it in detail. I just said that I had Googled British experimental writers, and on Google Books I got some pages off it where I read about Philip Toynbee, Rainer Heppenstall, Eva Figes, probably some others, but those, B.S. Johnson I was of course aware of, and Nicholas Mosley, and Anna Kawan, Paul Abelman. There's a person I haven't talked to in a long time that I really respect, that he has some of the most interesting taste in literature, and he swears by Paul Abelman. Yeah, so this is very detailed. We're talking about the era as a whole. We're looking at all these writers. There's like big breakdowns of all what their books are about, and some criticism and commentary on what works as an experiment and what doesn't. I think this is like, especially if Dalkey does another sale at some point, I think this is something I would highly recommend if you're interested in that sort of space. This is the Toynbee. The structure of the short novel Tea at Mrs. Goodman Explained. I love this book very much for sort of a couple of the inner worlds of particularly a pair of brothers I really love. But it's a fun little mystery. There is a section here about here we have Stuart Evans, The Gardens of the Casino. And there's talk of Case of Alienation, where he says, Case of Alienation far longer than most experimental novels, which tend to be very short, well, during that period maybe. purports to present the life and work of a writer who has died, but is in fact imaginary. But where both the above works present this single text, The Case of Alienation gathers together collage of materials by and about the dead author, Michael Caradoc, possibly a reference to the Welsh writer Caradoc Evans, which taken together form a portrait of the man. However, given such a huge collection of writing, this is necessarily an incomplete portrait and would always be, however much material is presented, and this is presumably Evans's point. It's interesting to compare the biography of Caradoc with biographies of real people constructed in this manner, but ultimately he feels like this book overstays its welcome. Not daunted, I picked up The Case of Alienation, and we can see very quickly that there is of these collages of the writing, we see some fairly conventional pieces. We see some of these that uses the layout of the page interestingly. We see some letters. Having read a couple of the first pages, I think that this sort of aesthetic and prose might appeal to me at least, and we'll see if the experimentation ultimately does anything. This is one of my most recent acquisitions, Seed Time by Philippe Jacotet. He was a Swiss poet. He wrote a lot. He was prolific. He wrote some nonfiction. He wrote a lot of notebooks and fragments and meditations, and this is sort of one of the first. It starts. I think he published his first collection of poetry in 1953, and this starts the year after. Flipped through and looked at little jottings, and some of them are little prose poems, and others are a bit more fully formed. But it has a very beautiful and very, to use the internet cliche, it's very comfy. So this is Seed Time. Covers 1954 to 79. And then he has the second Seed book, and then Seed Time 3. Shoutouts to the Highway Patrolman, Jacob. He was. It was a little while where he was nearly belligerently telling people in Orpheus's Discord that death is a gang boss. If you're not subscribed to Orpheus and you're watching this, then something wrong has happened. You should check him out. But yeah, Jacob very, very enthusiastic about this. So this was another part of that haul from that big sale from the Dalkey Archive. But also Highway Patrolman. The reason why I'm calling him by both names is he has started YouTubing himself. He has a fantastic bookshelf tour and also one video of recent purchases. And I think that he has some of the most interesting taste on BookTube. I feel like he is one of the people I learn about new authors from, and I spend a lot of time trying to learn about writers. So check out Jacob as well. Another one of these donkey books, Abrupt Mutations by Enrique Luis Revol. Argentinian, that's a plus in my book, poet and writer. This is supposedly funny and sounded like my sort of madcap. Like the book, the lives of artists and intellectuals is always a subject that draws me in. This was a book I purchased from Orpheus himself. I didn't know anything about it really. I've been interested in Rulfo for a long time. Shared, his podcast has a wonderful episode on Pedro Paramo, I just saw the picture of this and saw that it was a beautiful book, and I was curious. Sergio Pitol seems like an amazing writer. There is a podcast where they interview George Henson, who translated this, and he's apparently the first person to ever translate Pitol. And from everything I hear, he just seems like an amazing writer that is sort of very surprising that people haven't turned their attention to yet. This is 2015. Friends over at Deep Vellum. I think maybe there is one book of his before this that is translated. I'm not 100% sure. The podcast interview with Mr. Henson is sadly partially lost to the world. I think they had a lot of sound issues and lost a lot of the conversation, but what they do have is fascinating, and this is like something that I'm excited for on the level of like discovering Piglia and Arlt and those sort of, to me, big names. Awfully excited about that. Picked up the Selected Poems by A.R. Ammons. This is a few months ago now. I read through quite a bit of this. Course and Inlet is beautiful. I read 2 or 3 of his poems that I really liked, and I figured, his selected poems will be fine. I'm sure they'll have these poems. I regret not going straight for the collected, to be honest, because the poems are beautiful and the book is just too short. If there had been just a little bit more, then it might be enough. I'm not a completist, but I think this is just a little bit too little Ammons. Still very good. I bought Anne Enright's Actress. And I bought this at Ulysses Rare Books when I was in Dublin, and it is signed. I like Anne Enright. I bought this mostly just because it's nice to have a little token, a little book to remember my visit to this beautiful shop. There was so many beautiful editions of Joyce. There was some beautiful editions of Finnegan's Wake. Some so beautiful that I didn't dare look at the price. There were first edition of Flann O'Brien's The Dalkey Archive for €400, I think. This was a more reasonable 25. And I think Anne Wright is really good, actually. She's an Irish writer. I read The Gathering a few years back. 4 years maybe, I don't quite remember. And I think that she is like a good sentence by sentence writer. She's not experimental. She doesn't have any gimmicks or any sort of structural devices or anything. She writes good family dramas, sort of insightful psychologically, and like her prose is really good. A friend of mine who recommended her to me, he's a Norwegian friend who had been to Dublin a few years before, and he was just hanging out in the Dublish. He was just hanging out in the Irish writer section to try to find something new, and he picked up The Gathering, and yeah, we both really liked it. So hopefully this will be as good. I picked up Hugh Fulham McQuillan's Notes on Jackson and His Dead. This was not part of the Dalkey Archive sale. This was instead a book that Nate Rankin over at Books You Haven't Read was very eagerly describing. Nate talks about this in his Dublin wrap-up videos from his time of during Bloomsday, and this just sounds like funny madcap craziness. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, they say that he writes with the playfulness and intelligence of such masters of the short form as Borges, Poe, and Bartholomew, which is like an interesting group. No doubt all masters of the short form. We'll see. Hopefully Nate will put out a review and tell us how it is. Picked up Scars on the Soul by Françoise Sagan. She's mostly known for her debut novel Bonjour Tristas, which she wrote in 2 months while she was 18, and, you know, all shocking displays of female sexuality, and a little bit of a controversial one when it came out. This is a bit more. I've heard some praise of it. I am not entirely sure if I will like it, but I want to be open-minded and give it a go. I think I found it when I was looking for experimental women writers. I don't think she's that experimental, but hopefully still some good reading. Picked up Violetta Gregg, Swallowing Mercury. This is translated by Eliza Marciniak. Portobello Books published it. I came across this watching Sherds Tube. One half of the Sherds podcast decided that YouTube is an interesting medium, and thank goodness for that. He has put out a couple of very beautiful meditations and sort of video essays on literature that I very much agree with. This was mentioned in sort of AMA or Q&A video he had put out, and he said that Violetta Gregg is the inheritor of the style of writing of Bruno Schulz. Bruno Schulz is a favorite of mine, not just for his sort of peculiar and absurd storytelling, but like the prose is very beautiful, and there's a couple of stories that I always just open up and read a few pages of, because there are some passages that I find so beautiful, and I'm not quite sure if it's what aspect of her writing is in the same vein as Mr. Schultz, but I'm excited to find out. Another book I bought on my Dublin trip, Complete Novels of Flann O'Brien. It's been a book that, At Swim Two Birds and The Third Policeman have been books that I've been aware of for a very long time, and I think I even had At Swim Two Birds out of the library at one point, but I often grab more books that I can read from the library, and At Swim Two Birds fell between the cracks. But I bought this at museum gift shop, some art gallery in Dublin. Yeah, it's nice. I like the Everyman's Library. Like, this is, you know, the complete novels in one book, and it's still very manageable to both read and hold, so I'm very happy with that. Also, a few months ago I picked up the essays of Jon Fosse. I have read this first collection, his Gnostic essays. I have not started, but these essays are very, very good, and I've learned a lot about Norwegian and Nordic modernism and postmodernism from this. He has showed me some writers that I want to read for myself. He's given me some ideas about his own writing and how one should write that are very interesting. I think it's nice to see this because even though there's never any doubt that Fosse is an erudite and learned and very intelligent person, his prose, there is something exceedingly good about his prose when you read him, but at the same time it's very impressive as he does it with, it's very, very simple. He doesn't flaunt his erudition. He doesn't flaunt his intelligence. He just finds these beautiful moments and these beautiful characters and does such an amazing job of creating really special moments. But it's kind of nice to see how his mind works a bit more directly in these. So I know this. I think this first collection is translated. I don't know if it's in its entirety or if there's like selections, but even in English, I would recommend reading Fosse's essays. Picked up Triptych by Claude Simon. I really like the sort of nouveau roman French writers. It's been a while since I've been in that sort of Moreau, Jacques Roubaud, Michel Butor, Marguerite Yourcenar. There's so many really excellent French authors that end, in this sort of experimental and I don't know, sort of avant-garde writing pile. And Claude Simon is good. Flanders Road, of course, is his most famous, which I still want to get like a nice hardback copy of, but it's very expensive, like $140 easily. Triptych wasn't, so I'm glad to add that. Moldovan Literature Series. It's a decalogue and a ribald, exuberant, deliriously inventive postmodern Decameron. How can you not just put that in your cart? Hats off to the Dalkey Archive. They put out so many wonderful books, and I feel like so many of these, they have published so many writers that there's just so little talk about in the English speaking world. Or maybe there was some talk and it's just quieted down, but there's so many, I've had so many good reading experiences. This is fun. Here we have all of a sudden a little upside down. It's interesting because here the pagination is upside down and here it's not, but the text still is. Not sure what's up with that. Yeah, but either way, hats off to the Dalkey Archive. These authors deserve that we read them and talk about them. So hopefully I'll get back to talk about a few of these. Here Comes Everybody, an introduction to James Joyce for the ordinary reader. This is key, by Anthony Burgess. This is called Rejoice in the US. This is the UK edition of it. Faber and Faber. A good friend of mine gave me this. I reread Ulysses before my trip to Dublin, and I was reading some criticism, and there's just so many books on James Joyce. I read Ellman's biography earlier this year, and started at the end of last year, to be honest. Read The Most Dangerous Book. There's so many things, and Hugh Kenner's book is brilliant, and I was just like, he was talking about how this was really excellent, and I was like, yeah, no, that's great. Maybe one day I'll get to it, and he just bought it and gave it to me. Here, this is a gift. Read this. So I started reading it on the plane ride home, and it's really great. It's it's for the ordinary reader. He starts with Dubliners and Portrait and then spends quite a large chunk of this on Ulysses, and then he ends with a little bit on the Wake. And this has sort of inspired me to think that, you know, maybe it's finally time for me to pick up the Wake, and that made me also pick up Joseph Campbell's Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake. What I really want is a book called The Night Book. I have not gotten a copy of that yet, but hopefully we'll get to that. But this is like the most readable. I think this and Hugh Kenner would be like my pairing. I guess I'm spoiling myself a little bit because I do want to make a Joyce video and talk about it, but this isn't written as sort of literary criticism for English professors to read and hem and haw at. He's really doing his best to show you how to enjoy and why Joyce is great. Quite the gifted linguist, Burgess, so he has some insights there, but it's not written in the overly academic way. But yeah, I think this is definitely worth reading. I think I rated it very highly on Goodreads. Picked up A Convergence of Birds, and this is a collection of fiction poetry that is inspired by sort of the bird boxes of Joseph Cornell. It's edited by Jonathan Safran Foer and signed by him, which isn't a contributor that I hoped had signed it, but that's okay. It's still fun. Look at these contributors. Barry Lopez. There's Rick Moody, Paul West. You know, there's a lot of interesting. Lydia Davis, she's excellent. Pinsky, and yeah. Mary Caponegro is the one short story that I really wanted this for, though. But thankfully, it is a beautiful and interesting book. Included are all of these glossy prints of a lot of Cornell's bird boxes. I was talking to, pretty sure it was Matt a few months ago, or from the Spine Crackers. If you're not following the Spine Crackers and listening to their very funny podcast, you definitely should. I was talking, it was either Paul or Matt, but I think it was Matt. He said that he had gone to the Cornell exhibition in the U.S. and I guess that they did have a lot of them all over the place. I would have loved to have seen some of these works. It's quite interesting. Here's the Caponegro that I bought the book for. I think that Caponegro is a very good writer. She was a student of John Hawkes. I think also William Gaddis. I know that Hawkes has written several sort of jacket blurbs for her, and yeah, I think she's quite something. I've read a couple of her books, but not all of them. So if people are interested in hearing more about Caponegro, I will perhaps make a video about her at some point. But yeah, lovely book. Got Cabrera Infante's Three Trapped Tigers. It's just one of those books you hear a lot about. Another one that is mentioned in the same breath is, of course, Terra Nostra, which Sean over at Travel Through Stories is doing sort of a reading group together with Waste mailing list. It's a very, it's a good book. It's even better discussion. So you should join that Discord server if you haven't. Yeah, I was happy to find a nice clean edition of this. Last book I bought in Dublin, collected poems of W.B. Yeats. I like Yeats. He has some of his sort of woodland sort of imagery and poetry is is really appealing to me. Saw some nice Yeats exhibitions in Dublin as well. Saw a lot of his notebooks. Saw paintings by his younger brother. Been reading this and enjoying it. Selfigard Goes. Sorry about the pronunciation. I have no idea. A Kensington Quartet, a novel. This is just another one of those. I didn't read too much about it, except sort of this blurb here, and imagistic brilliance. 600 word final sentence with soaring and flowing rhythm. Seems interesting and worth checking out. Not too much more to say about Paavo Matsin's Gogol's Disco. But interestingly, it's Estonian literature. I haven't read a lot of Estonian literature. I'll say friendship. There's a new person I've been talking to on Discord who I enjoy his company very much. He mentioned a book called Radio. I will not remember the name of the author, but I'll overlay the book here. That sounds very interesting. This is another one of the books from the sale that I'm very excited about. I love Flaubert. I love Sentimental Education. I love The Temptation of St. Anthony. And this is supposed to be his sort of experimental, bit of a madcap one. Translated by Mark Polzati. A couple more Dalkies. Okay, well, I did promise you some more spiciness in the middle, so not really spicy in the sense that anyone needs to know about this writer, but a lot of people will appreciate this copy of Man Without Qualities by Robert Musil. I've read a little bit of the first one. Usually when there are books that I have great expectations for, I would just buy the book. But I feel like my friends are very divided on this work. I feel like some of the people I've known longer and have very similar tastes as, I feel like they do not like this book. I feel like a lot of the people I meet, I've met a few years later, they correctly recognize that modernism was an amazing literary period, and they seem to think that Musil is excellent. Now, I get that this is like a tour de force of like a novel of ideas, and I think that might be where people are divided, because I know some people who don't think that the quality of the writing is enough to carry the ideas, and I'm sure some will be offended and say that is stupid. Writing is excellent, the content is excellent, and I don't know, but I figure that I've heard such high praise from a lot of people that I figured, okay, it's worth to give it a proper go and see what the big deal is. Because if it delivers to half the praise it receives, then it'll be an excellent read. Well, if you made it to the end, then I'm very grateful, and I will now reveal that this is a two-parter. I might not even mention it in the title of the next one, but I have edited down a lot, but I still have another 30-40 minutes of books to show you. So, till next time.